The Insidious Dr. Fu-Manchu, by Sax Rohmer, Part 3, Chapter 9. With the first coming of light, Eltham, Smith and I tested the electrical contrivances from every point. They were in perfect order. It became more and more incomprehensible how anyone could have entered and quitted Redmoat during the night. The barbed wire fencing was intact and bore no signs of having been tampered with. Smith and I undertook an exhaustive examination of the shrubbery. At the spot where we had found the dog, some 5 paces to the west of the copper beech, the grass and weeds were trampled, and the surrounding laurels and rhododendrons bore evidence of a struggle, but no human footprint could be found. "The ground is dry," said Smith. "We cannot expect much." "In my opinion," I said, "someone tried to get at Caesar. His presence is dangerous." And in his rage he broke loose. "I think so too," agreed Smith. "But why did this person make for here? And how, having mastered the dog, get out of Redmoat?" "I am open to admit the possibility of someone's getting in during the day whilst the gates are open, and hiding until dusk. But how, in the name of all that's wonderful, does he get out? He must possess the attributes of a bird." I thought of Greba Eltham's statements, reminding my friend of her description of the thing which she had seen passing into this strangely haunted shrubbery. "That line of speculation soon takes us out of our depth, Petrie," he said. "Let us stick to what we can understand, and that may help us to a clearer idea of what at present is incomprehensible. My view of the case to date stands thus. 1. Eltham, having rashly decided to return to the interior of China, is warned by an official whose friendship he has won in some way to stay in England. 2. I know this official for one of the yellow group represented in England by Dr. Fu-Manchu. 3. Several attempts, of which we know but little, to get at Eltham are frustrated, presumably by his curious defences. An attempt in a train fails owing to Miss Eltham's distaste for refreshment room coffee. An attempt here fails owing to her insomnia. 4. During Eltham's absence from Redmoat, certain preparations are made for his return. These lead to A.D., the death of Denby's collie, B. the things heard and seen by Miss Eltham, Wige, DT2, the things heard and seen by us all last night. So that the clearing up of my 4th pointed est, the discovery of the nature of these preparations, becomes our immediate concern. The prime object of these preparations, Petrie, was to enable someone to gain access to Eltham's room. The other events are incidental. The dogs had to be got rid of, for instance, and there is no doubt that Miss Eltham's wakefulness saved her father a second time. But from what? For heaven's sake, from what? Smith glanced about into the light-patched shadows. "From a visit by someone, perhaps by Fu-Manchu himself," he said in a hushed voice. "The object of that visit I hope we may never learn, for that would mean that it had been achieved." "Smith," I said, "I do not altogether understand you, but do you think he has some incredible creature hidden here somewhere? It would be like him. I begin to suspect the most formidable creature in the known world to be hidden here. I believe Fu-Manchu is somewhere inside Redmoat." Our conversation was interrupted at this point by Denby, who came to report that he had examined the moat, the roadside, and the bank of the stream, but found no footprints or clue of any kind. "No one left the grounds of Redmoat last night, I think," he said, and his voice had awe in it. That day dragged slowly on. A party of us scoured the neighbourhood for traces of strangers, examining every foot of the Roman ruin hard by, but vainly. "May not your presence here induce Fu-Manchu to abandon his plans?" I asked Smith. "I think not," he replied. "You see, unless we can prevail upon him, Eltham sails in a fortnight, so the doctor has no time to waste. Furthermore, I have an idea that his arrangements are of such a character that they must go forward. He might turn aside, of course, to assassinate me if opportunity arose, but we know from experience that he permits nothing to interfere with his schemes. There are few states, I suppose, which exact so severe a toll from one's nervous system as the anticipation of calamity. All anticipation is keener, be it of joy or pain, than the reality whereof it is a mental forecast. But that inactive waiting at Redmoat for the blow which we knew full well to be pending exceeded in its nerve taxation anything I hitherto had experienced. I felt as one bound upon an Aztec altar, with the priest's obsidian knife raised above my breast. Secret and malign forces throbbed about us, forces against which we had no armour. Dreadful as it was, I counted a mercy that the climax was reached so quickly. And it came suddenly enough, for there in that quiet Norfolk home we found ourselves at hand, grips with one of the mysterious horrors which characterized the operations of Dr. Fu-Manchu. It was upon us before we realized it. There is no incidental music to the dramas of real life. As we sat on the little terrace in the creeping twilight, I remember thinking how the peace of the scene gave the lie to my fears that we bordered upon tragic things. Then Caesar, who had been a docile patient all day, began howling again, and I saw Greba Eltham shudder. I caught Smith's eye, and was about to propose our retirement indoors, when the party was broken up in more turbulent fashion. I suppose it was the presence of the girl which prompted Denby to the rash act, a desire personally to distinguish himself. But, as I recalled afterwards, his gaze had rarely left the shrubbery since dusk, save to seek her face, and now he leaped wildly to his feet, overturning his chair, and dashed across the grass to the trees. "Did you see it?" he yelled. "Did you see it?" He evidently carried a revolver, for from the edge of the shrubbery a shot sounded, and in the flash we saw Denby with the weapon raised. "Greba, go in and fasten the windows," cried Eltham. "Mr. Smith, will you enter the bushes from the west? Dr. Petrie, east. Edwards, Edwards!" And he was off across the lawn with the nervous activity of a cat. As I made off in an opposite direction, I heard the gardener's voice from the lower gate, and I saw Eltham's plan. It was to surround the shrubbery. 2 more shots and 2 flashes from the dense heart of greenwood. Then a loud cry, I thought, from Denby, and a second, muffled one, following silence, only broken by the howling of the mastiff. I sprinted through the rose garden, leaped heedlessly over a bed of geranium and heliotrope, and plunged in among the bushes and under the elms. Away on the left I heard Edward shouting, and Eltham's answering voice. "Denby!" I cried, and yet louder, "Denby!" But the silence fell again. Dusk was upon Redmoat now, but from sitting in the twilight my eyes had grown accustomed to gloom, and I could see fairly well what lay before me. Not daring to think what might lurk above, below, around me, I pressed on into the midst of the thicket. "Vernon," came Eltham's voice from one side. "One side? Bear more to the right, Edwards," I heard Nayland Smith cry directly ahead of me. With an eerie and indescribable sensation of impending disaster upon me, I thrust my way through to a grey patch which marked a break in the elm roof. At the foot of the copper beech I almost fell over Eltham. Then Smith plunged into view. Lastly, Edwards the gardener rounded a big rhododendron and completed the party. We stood quite still for a moment. A faint breeze whispered through the beech leaves. "Where is he?" I cannot remember who put it into words. I was too dazed with amazement to notice. Then Eltham began shouting, "Vernon! Vernon! Vernon!" his voice pitched higher upon each repetition. There was something horrible about that vain calling, under the whispering beech, with shrubs banked about us, cloaking God alone could know what. From the back of the house came Caesar's faint reply. "Quick, lights," rapped Smith. "Every lamp you have." Off we went, dodging laurels and privets, and poured out onto the lawn, a disordered company. Eltham's face was deathly pale, and his jaw set hard. He met my eye. "God forgive me," he said. "I could do murder tonight." He was a man composed of strange perplexities. It seemed an age before the lights were found. But at last we returned to the bushes, really after a very brief delay, and 10 minutes sufficed us to explore the entire shrubbery, for it was not extensive. We found his revolver, but there was no one there, nothing. When we all stood again on the lawn, I thought that I had never seen Smith so haggard. "What in heaven's name can we do?" he muttered. "What does it mean?" He expected no answer, for there was none to offer one. "Search, everywhere," said Eltham hoarsely. He ran off into the rose garden, and began beating about among the flowers like a madman, muttering, "Vernon, Vernon." For close upon an hour we all searched. We searched every square yard, I think, within the wire fencing, and found no trace. Miss Eltham slipped out in the confusion, and joined with the rest of us in that frantic hunt. Some of the servants assisted too. It was a group terrified and awe-stricken which came together again on the terrace. One and then another would give up, until only Eltham and Smith were missing. Then they came back together from examining the steps to the lower gate. Eltham dropped onto a rustic seat and sank his head in his hands. Nayland Smith paced up and down like a newly caged animal, snapping his teeth together and tugging at his ear. Possessed by some sudden idea, or pressed to action by his tumultuous thoughts, he snatched up a lantern and strode silently off across the grass into the shrubbery once more. I followed him. I think his idea was that he might surprise anyone who lurked there. He surprised himself, and all of us. For right at the margin he tripped and fell flat. I ran to him. He had fallen over the body of Denby, which lay there. Denby had not been there a few moments before, and how he came to be there now we dared not conjecture. Mr. Eltham joined us, uttered one short, dry sob, and dropped upon his knees. Then we were carrying Denby back to the house, with the mastiff howling a marche funèbre. We laid him on the grass where it sloped down from the terrace. Nayland Smith's haggard face was terrible, but the stark horror of the thing inspired him to that, which, conceived earlier, had saved Denby. Twisting suddenly to Eltham, he roared in a voice audible beyond the river, "Heavens, we are fools! Loose the dog!" "But the dog," I began. Smith clapped his hand over my mouth. "I know he's crippled," he whispered. "But if anything human lurks there, the dog will lead us to it. If a man is there, he will fly. Why did we not think of it before? Fools, fools!" He raised his voice again. "Keep him on leash, Edwards. He will lead us." The scheme succeeded. Edwards barely had started on his errand when bells began ringing inside the house. "Wait," snapped Eltham, and rushed indoors. A moment later he was out again, his eyes gleaming madly. "Above the moat," he panted, and we were off en masse round the edge of the trees. It was dark above the moat, but not so dark as to prevent our seeing a narrow ladder of thin bamboo joints and silken cord hanging by 2 hooks from the top of the 12-foot wire fence. There was no sound. "He's out!" screamed Eltham. Down the steps. We all ran our best and swiftest. But Eltham outran us. Like a fury he tore at bolts and bars, and like a fury sprang out into the road. Straight and white it showed to the acclivity by the Roman ruin, but no living thing moved upon it. The distant baying of the dog was borne to our ears. "Curse it, he's crippled," hissed Smith. "Without him, as well pursue a shadow." A few hours later the shrubbery yielded up its secret, a simple one enough, a big cask sunk in a pit, with a laurel shrub cunningly affixed to its movable lid, which was further disguised with tufts of grass. A slender bamboo-jointed rod lay near the fence. It had a hook on the top, and was evidently used for attaching the ladder. "It was the end of this ladder which Miss Eltham saw," said Smith, as he trailed it behind him into the shrubbery when she interrupted him in her father's room. He and whomever he had with him doubtless slipped in during the daytime, whilst Eltham was absent in London, bringing the prepared cask and all necessary implements with them. They concealed themselves somewhere, probably in the shrubbery, and during the night made the cache. The excavated earth would be disposed of on the flower beds. The dummy bush they probably had ready. You see, the problem of getting IN was never a big one. But owing to the defences, it was impossible, whilst Eltham was in residence at any rate, to get OUT after dark. For Fu-Manchu's purposes, then, a working base inside Redmoat was essential. His servant, for he needed assistance, must have been in hiding somewhere outside, heaven knows where. During the day they could come or go by the gates, as we have already noted. You think it was the doctor himself? It seems possible. Who else has eyes like the eyes Miss Eltham saw from the window last night? Then remains to tell the nature of the outrage whereby Fu-Manchu had planned to prevent Eltham's leaving England for China. This we learn from Denby, for Denby was not dead. It was easy to divine that he had stumbled upon the fiendish visitor at the very entrance to his burrow, had been stunned, judging from the evidence, with a sandbag, and dragged down into the cache, to which he must have lain in such dangerous proximity as to render detection of the dummy bush possible in removing him. The quickest expedient, then, had been to draw him beneath. When the search of the shrubbery was concluded, his body had been borne to the edge of the bushes and laid where we found it. Why his life had been spared I cannot conjecture, but provision had been made against his recovering consciousness and revealing the secret of the shrubbery. The ruse of releasing the mastiff alone had terminated the visit of the unbidden guest within Redmoat. Denby made a very slow recovery, and, even when convalescent, consciously added not one fact to those we already had collated, his memory had completely deserted him. This, in my opinion, as in those of the several specialists consulted, was due, not to the blow on the head, but to the presence, slightly below, and to the right of the first cervical curve of the spine, of a minute puncture, undoubtedly caused by a hypodermic syringe. Then, unconsciously, poor Denby furnished the last link in the chain, for undoubtedly by means of this operation Fu-Manchu had designed to efface from Eltham's mind his plans of return to Honan. The nature of the fluid which could produce such mental symptoms was a mystery which defied Western science, one of the many strange secrets of Dr. Fu-Manchu. Chapter 10. Since Nayland Smith's return from Burma, I had rarely taken up a paper without coming upon evidences of that seething which had cast up Dr. Fu-Manchu. Whether hitherto such items had escaped my attention or had seemed to demand no particular notice, or whether they now became increasingly numerous, I was unable to determine. One evening, some little time after our sojourn in Norfolk, in glancing through a number of papers which I had brought in with me, I chanced upon no fewer than 4 items of news bearing more or less directly upon the grim business which engaged my friend and I. No white man, I honestly believe, appreciates the unemotional cruelty of the Chinese. Throughout the time that Dr. Fu-Manchu remained in England, the press preserved a uniform silence upon the subject of his existence. This was due to Nayland Smith. But, as a result, I feel assured that my account of the Chinaman's deeds will, in many quarters, meet with an incredulous reception. I had been at work, earlier in the evening, upon the opening chapters of this chronicle, and I had realized how difficult it would be for my reader, amid secure and cosy surroundings, to credit any human being with a callous villainy great enough to conceive and to put into execution such a death-pest as that directed against Sir Crichton Davy. One would expect God's worst man to shrink from employing, against however vile an enemy, such an instrument as the Zayat kiss. So thinking, my eye was caught by the following. E-Express, Correspondent, New York. Secret Service men of the United States government are searching the South Sea Islands for a certain Hawaiian from the island of Maui, who, it is believed, has been selling poisonous scorpions to Chinese in Honolulu, anxious to get rid of their children. Infanticide, by scorpion and otherwise, among the Chinese, has increased so terribly that the authorities have started a searching inquiry, which has led to the hunt for the scorpion dealer of Maui. Practically all the babies that die mysteriously are unwanted girls, and in nearly every case the parents promptly ascribe the death to the bite of a scorpion, and are ready to produce some more or less poisonous insect in support of the statement. The authorities have no doubt that infanticide by scorpion bite is a growing practice, and orders have been given to hunt down the scorpion dealer at any cost. Is it any matter for wonder that such a people had produced a Fu-Manchu? I pasted the cutting into a scrapbook, determined that, if I lived to publish my account of those days, I would quote it therein as casting a sidelight upon Chinese character. A Reuters message to The Globe and a paragraph in The Star also furnished work for my scissors. Here were evidences of the deep-seated unrest, the secret turmoil which manifested itself so far from its centre as peaceful England in the person of the sinister Doctor. Hong Kong, Friday. Li Hon-hung, the Chinaman who fired at the governor yesterday, was charged before the magistrate with shooting at him with intent to kill, which is equivalent to attempted murder. The prisoner, who was not defended, pleaded guilty. The assistant Crown Solicitor, who prosecuted, asked for a remand until Monday, which was granted. Snapshots taken by the spectators of the outrage yesterday disclosed the presence of an accomplice, also armed with a revolver. It is reported that this man, who was arrested last night, was in possession of incriminating documentary evidence. Later. Examination of the documents found on Li Hon-hung's accomplice has disclosed the fact that both men were well financed by the Canton Triad Society, the directors of which had enjoined the assassination of Sir F.M. or Mr. C.S., the colonial secretary. In a report prepared by the accomplice for dispatch to Canton, also found on his person, he expressed regret that the attempt had failed. Reuters. It is officially reported in St. Baz, Petersburg, that a force of Chinese soldiers and villagers surrounded the house of a Russian subject named Saeed Effendi near Kotan in Chinese Turkestan. They fired at the house and set it in flames. There were in the house about 100 Russians, many of whom were killed. The Russian government has instructed its minister at Peking to make the most vigorous representations on the subject. Reuter. Finally, in a personal column, I found the following. O. Nan, have abandoned visit, Iletum. I had just pasted it into my book when Nayland Smith came in and threw himself into an armchair, facing me across the table. I showed him the cutting. I am glad for Eltum's sake and for the girls, was his comment. But it marks another victory for Fu-Manchu. Just heaven! Why is retribution delayed? Smith's darkly tanned face had grown leaner than ever since he had begun his fight with the most uncanny opponent, I suppose, against whom a man ever had pitted himself. He stood up and began restlessly to pace the room, furiously stuffing tobacco into his briar. I have seen Sir Lionel Barton, he said abruptly, and, to put the whole thing in a nutshell, he has laughed at me. During the months that I have been wondering where he had gone to, he has been somewhere in Egypt. He certainly bears a charmed life, for on the evidence of his letter to the Times, he has seen things in Tibet which Fu-Manchu would have the West blind to. In fact, I think he has found a new keyhole to the gate of the Indian Empire. Long ago we had placed the name of Sir Lionel Barton upon the list of those whose lives stood between Fu-Manchu and the attainment of his end. Orientalist and explorer, the fearless traveller who first had penetrated to Lhasa, who thrice, as a pilgrim, had entered forbidden Mecca, he now had turned his attention again to Tibet, thereby signing his own death warrant. That he has reached England alive is a hopeful sign, I suggested. Smith shook his head and lighted the blackened briar. England at present is the web, he replied. The spider will be waiting. Petrie, I sometimes despair. Sir Lionel is an impossible man to shepherd. You ought to see his house at Finchley, a low, squat place completely hemmed in by trees. Damp as a swamp, smells like a jungle, everything topsy-turvy. He only arrived today, and he is working and eating, and sleeping, I expect, in a study that looks like an earthquake at Sotheby's auction rooms. The rest of the house is half a menagerie and half a circus. He has a Bedouin groom, a Chinese body servant, and heaven only knows what other strange people. Chinese. Yes, I saw him, a squinting Cantonese he calls Kui. I don't like him. Also, there is a secretary known as Strotzer, who has an unpleasant face. He is a fine linguist, I understand, and is engaged upon the Spanish notes for Barton's forthcoming book on the Mayapan temples. By the way, all Sir Lionel's baggage disappeared from the landing stage, including his Tibetan notes. Significant, of course. But he argues that he has crossed Tibet from the Kuen-Lun to the Himalayas without being assassinated, and therefore that it is unlikely he will meet with that fate in London. I left him dictating the book from memory, at the rate of about 200 words a minute. He is wasting no time. Wasting time. In addition to the Yucatan book and the work on Tibet, he has to read a paper at the Institute next week about some tomb he has unearthed in Egypt. As I came away, a van drove up from the docks, and a couple of fellows delivered a sarcophagus as big as a boat. It is unique, according to Sir Lionel, and will go to the British Museum after he has examined it. The man crams 6 months' work into 6 weeks, then he is off again. What do you propose to do? What can I do? I know that Fu-Manchu will make an attempt upon him. I cannot doubt it. Ugh, that house gave me the shudders. No sunlight, I'll swear, Petrie, can ever penetrate to the rooms. And when I arrived this afternoon, clouds of gnats floated like motes wherever a stray beam filtered through the trees of the avenue. There's a steamy smell about the place that is almost malarious, and the whole of the west front is covered with a sort of monkey creeper, which he has imported at some time or other. It has a close, exotic perfume that is quite in the picture. I tell you, the place was made for murder. Have you taken any precautions? I called at Scotland Yard and sent a man down to watch the house, but he shrugged his shoulders helplessly. What is Sir Lionel like? A madman, Petrie. A tall, massive man, wearing a dirty dressing gown of neutral colour, a man with untidy grey hair and a bristling moustache, keen blue eyes, and a brown skin, who wears a short beard or rarely shaves. I don't know which. I left him striding about among the 1,001 curiosities of that incredible room, picking his way through his antique furniture, works of reference, manuscripts, mummies, spears, pottery, and what-not. Sometimes kicking a book from his course, or stumbling over a stuffed crocodile or a Mexican mask, alternately dictating and conversing. Phew! For some time we were silent. "Smith," I said, "we are making no headway in this business. With all the forces arrayed against him, Fu-Manchu still eludes us, still pursues his devilish, inscrutable way." Nayland Smith nodded. "And we don't know all," he said. "We mark such and such a man as one alive to the yellow peril, and we warn him, if we have time. Perhaps he escapes, perhaps he does not. But what do we know, Petrie, of those others who may die every week by his murderous agency? We cannot know every one who has read the riddle of China. I never see a report of someone found drowned, of an apparent suicide, of a sudden though seemingly natural death without wondering. I tell you, Fu-Manchu is omnipresent. His tentacles embrace everything. I said that Sir Lionel must bear a charmed life. The fact that W.E. are alive is a miracle." He glanced at his watch. "Nearly 11, he said. "But sleep seems a waste of time, apart from its dangers." We heard a bell ring. A few moments later followed a knock at the room door. "Come in," I cried. A girl entered with a telegram addressed to Smith. His jaw looked very square in the lamplight, and his eyes shone like steel as he took it from her and opened the envelope. He glanced at the form, stood up and passed it to me, reaching for his hat, which lay upon my writing table. "God help us, Petrie," he said. This was the message: Sir Lionel Barton murdered. Meet me at his house at once. Weymouth, I'm a Spectre. Chapter 11. Although we avoided all unnecessary delay, it was close upon midnight when our cab swung round into a darkly shadowed avenue, at the farther end of which, as seen through a tunnel, the moonlight glittered upon the windows of Rowan House, Sir Lionel Barton's home. Stepping out before the porch of the long, squat building, I saw that it was banked in, as Smith had said, by trees and shrubs. The facade showed mantled in the strange exotic creeper which he had mentioned, and the air was pungent with an odour of decaying vegetation, with which mingled the heavy perfume of the little nocturnal red flowers which bloomed luxuriantly upon the creeper. The place looked a veritable wilderness, and when we were admitted to the hall by Inspector Weymouth, I saw that the interior was in keeping with the exterior, for the hall was constructed from the model of some apartment in an Assyrian temple, and the squat columns, the low seats, the hangings, all were eloquent of neglect, being thickly dust-coated. The musty smell, too, was almost as pronounced here as outside, beneath the trees. To a library, whose contents overflowed in many literary torrents upon the floor, the detective conducted us. "Good heavens!" I cried. "What's that?" Something leaped from the top of the bookcase, ambled silently across the littered carpet, and passed from the library like a golden streak. I stood looking after it with startled eyes. Inspector Weymouth laughed dryly. "It's a young puma, or a civet cat or something, Doctor," he said. "This house is full of surprises and mysteries." His voice was not quite steady, I thought, and he carefully closed the door ere proceeding further. "Where is he?" asked Nayland Smith harshly. "How was it done?" Weymouth sat down and lighted a cigar which I offered him. "I thought you would like to hear what led up to it, so far as we know, before seeing him." Smith nodded. "Well," continued the inspector, "the man you arranged to send down from the yard got here all right, and took up a post in the road outside, where he could command a good view of the gates. He saw and heard nothing until going on for 10:30, when a young lady turned up and went in. A young lady, Miss Edmonds, Sir Lionel's shorthand typist. She had found, after getting home, that her bag, with her purse in, was missing, and she came back to see if she had left it here. She gave the alarm. My man heard the row from the road and came in. Then he ran out and rang us up. I immediately wired for you. He heard the row, you say. What row? Miss Edmonds went into violent hysterics. Smith was pacing the room now in tense excitement. Describe what he saw when he came in. He saw a Negro footman. There isn't an Englishman in the house trying to pacify the girl out in the hall yonder, and a Malay and another coloured man beating their foreheads and howling. There was no sense to be got out of any of them, so he started to investigate for himself. He had taken the bearings of the place earlier in the evening, and from the light in a window on the ground floor had located the study, so he set out to look for the door. When he found it, it was locked from the inside. Well, he went out and round to the window. There's no blind, and from the shrubbery you can see into the lumber room known as the study. He looked in, as apparently Miss Edmonds had done before him. What he saw accounted for her hysterics. Both Smith and I were hanging upon his words. All amongst the rubbish on the floor, a big Egyptian mummy case was lying on its side, and face downwards with his arms thrown across it lay Sir Lionel Barton. My God, yes. Gwan. There was only a shaded reading lamp alight, and it stood on a chair, shining right down on him. It made a patch of light on the floor, you understand. The inspector indicated its extent with his hands. Well, as the man smashed the glass and got the window open and was just climbing in, he saw something else, so he says. He paused. What did he see? Demanded Smith shortly. A sort of green mist. Sir. He says it seemed to be alive. It moved over the floor, about a foot from the ground, going away from him and towards a curtain at the other end of the study. Nayland Smith fixed his eyes upon the speaker. Where did he first see this green mist? He says, Mr. Smith, that he thinks it came from the mummy case. Yes, go on. It is to his credit that he climbed into the room after seeing a thing like that. He turned the body over, and Sir Lionel looked horrible. He was quite dead. Then Croxted, that's the man's name, went over to this curtain. There was a glass door shut. He opened it, and it gave on a conservatory, a place stacked from the tiled floor to the glass roof with more rubbish. It was dark inside, but enough light came from the study. It's really a drawing-room, by the way, as he turned all the lamps on, to give him another glimpse of this green, crawling mist. There are 3 steps to go down. On the steps lay a dead Chinaman. A dead Chinaman. A dead Chinaman. Doctor seen them, rapped Smith. Yes, a local man. He was out of his depth, I could see. Contradicted himself 3 times. But there's no need for another opinion until we get the coroner's. And Croxted. Croxted was taken ill, Mr. Smith, and had to be sent home in a cab. What ails him? Detective Inspector Weymouth raised his eyebrows and carefully knocked the ash from his cigar. He held out until I came, gave me the story, and then fainted right away. He said that something in the conservatory seemed to get him by the throat. Did he mean that literally? I couldn't say. We had to send the girl home, too, of course. Nayland Smith was pulling thoughtfully at the lobe of his left ear. Got any theory? He jerked. Weymouth shrugged his shoulders. Not one that includes the green mist, he said. Shall we go in now? We crossed the Assyrian Hall, where the members of that strange household were gathered in a panic-stricken group. They numbered 4. 2 of them were Negroes, and 2 Easterns of some kind. I missed the Chinaman, of whom Smith had spoken, and the Italian secretary, and from the way in which my friend peered about the shadows of the hall, I divined that he, too, wondered at their absence. We entered Sir Lionel's study, an apartment which I despair of describing. Nayland Smith's words, an earthquake at Sotheby's auction rooms, leaped to my mind at once, for the place was simply stacked with curious litter-loot of Africa, Mexico, and Persia. In a clearing by the hearth, a gas stove stood upon a packing case, and about it lay a number of utensils for camp cookery. The odour of rotting vegetation, mingled with the insistent perfume of the strange night-blooming flowers, was borne in through the open window. In the centre of the floor, beside an overturned sarcophagus, lay a figure in a neutral-coloured dressing gown, face downwards, and arms thrust forward and over the side of the ancient Egyptian mummy case. My friend advanced and knelt beside the dead man. Good God! Smith sprang upright and turned with an extraordinary expression to Inspector Weymouth. You do not know Sir Lionel Barton by sight, he rapped. No, began Weymouth, but this is not Sir Lionel. This is Strozza, the secretary. What? Shouted Weymouth. Where is the other, the Chinaman quick? Cried Smith. I have had him left where he was found, on the conservatory steps, said the inspector. Smith ran across the room to where, beyond the open door, a glimpse might be obtained of stacked-up curiosities. Holding back the curtain to allow more light to penetrate, he bent forward over a crumpled-up figure which lay upon the steps below. It is, he cried aloud. It is Sir Lionel's servant, Qui. Weymouth and I looked at one another across the body of the Italian, then our eyes turned together to where my friend, grim-faced, stood over the dead Chinaman. A breeze whispered through the leaves. A great wave of exotic perfume swept from the open window towards the curtained doorway. It was a breath of the east that stretched out a yellow hand to the west. It was symbolic of the subtle, intangible power manifested in Dr. Fu-Manchu as Nayland Smith, lean, agile, bronzed with the suns of Burma, was symbolic of the clean British efficiency which sought to combat the insidious enemy. "One thing is evident," said Smith. "No one in the house, Strozza excepted, knew that Sir Lionel was absent." "How do you arrive at that?" asked Weymouth. "The servants in the hall are bewailing him as dead. If they had seen him go out, they would know that it must be someone else who lies here." "What about the Chinaman? Since there is no other means of entrance to the conservatory save through the study, Qui must have hidden himself there at some time when his master was absent from the room. Croxted found the communicating door closed. What killed the Chinaman? Both Miss Edmonds and Croxted found the study door locked from the inside. What killed Strozza? Retorted Smith. "You will have noted," continued the inspector, "that the secretary is wearing Sir Lionel's dressing gown. It was seeing him in that, as she looked in at the window, which led Miss Edmonds to mistake him for her employer, and, consequently, to put us on the wrong scent. He wore it in order that anybody looking in at the window would be sure to make that mistake," rapped Smith. "Why?" I asked. "Because he came here for a felonious purpose." "Please." Smith stooped and took up several tools from the litter on the floor. "There lies the lid. He came to open the sarcophagus. It contained the mummy of some notable person who flourished under Meneptah II, and Sir Lionel told me that a number of valuable ornaments and jewels probably were secreted amongst the wrappings. He proposed to open the thing and to submit the entire contents to examination tonight. He evidently changed his mind, fortunately for himself." I ran my fingers through my hair in perplexity. "Then what has become of the mummy?" Nayland Smith laughed dryly. "It has vanished in the form of a green vapour, apparently," he said. "Look at Strozza's face." He turned the body over, and, used as I was to such spectacles, the contorted features of the Italian filled me with horror, so suggestive were they of a death more than ordinarily violent. I pulled aside the dressing gown and searched the body for marks, but failed to find any. Nayland Smith crossed the room, and, assisted by the detective, carried Qui, the Chinaman, into the study and laid him fully in the light. His puckered yellow face presented a sight even more awful than the other, and his blue lips were drawn back, exposing both upper and lower teeth. There were no marks of violence, but his limbs, like Strozza's, had been tortured during his mortal struggles into unnatural postures. The breeze was growing higher, and pungent odour waves from the damp shrubbery, bearing too the oppressive sweetness of the creeping plant, swept constantly through the open window. Inspector Weymouth carefully relighted his cigar. "I'm with you this far, Mr. Smith," he said. "Strozza, knowing Sir Lionel to be absent, locked himself in here to rifle the mummy case, for Croxted, entering by way of the window, found the key on the inside. Strozza didn't know that the Chinaman was hidden in the conservatory, and Qui did not dare to show himself, because he too was there for some mysterious reason of his own," interrupted Smith. "Having got the lid off somebody, suppose we say the mummy?" Weymouth laughed uneasily. "Well, sir, something that vanished from a locked room without opening the door or the window killed Strozza." "And something which, having killed Strozza, next killed the Chinaman, apparently without troubling to open the door behind which he lay concealed," Smith continued. "For once in a way, Inspector, Dr. Fu-Manchu has employed an ally which even his giant will was incapable entirely to subjugate. What blind force, what terrific agent of death had he confined in that sarcophagus?" "You think this is the work of Fu-Manchu?" I said. "If you are correct, his power indeed is more than human." Something in my voice, I suppose, brought Smith right about. He surveyed me curiously. "Can you doubt it? The presence of a concealed Chinaman surely is sufficient. Qui, I feel assured, was one of the murder group, though probably he had only recently entered that mysterious service. He is unarmed, or I should feel disposed to think that his part was to assassinate Sir Lionel whilst, unsuspecting the presence of a hidden enemy, he was at work here. Strozza's opening the sarcophagus clearly spoiled the scheme. and led to the death of a servant of Fu-Manchu. Yes, I am at a loss to account for that. Do you think that the sarcophagus entered into the scheme, Smith? My friend looked at me in evident perplexity. You mean that its arrival at the time when a creature of the Dr. Qui was concealed here may have been a coincidence? I nodded, and Smith bent over the sarcophagus, curiously examining the garish paintings with which it was decorated inside and out. It lay sideways upon the floor, and seizing it by its edge, he turned it over. Heavy, he muttered, but Strozza must have capsized it as he fell. He would not have laid it on its side to remove the lid. Hello! He bent farther forward, catching at a piece of twine, and out of the mummy case pulled a rubber stopper, or cork. This was stuck in a hole level with the floor of the thing, he said. Ugh, it has a disgusting smell. I took it from his hands, and was about to examine it, when a loud voice sounded outside in the hall. The door was thrown open, and a big man, who, despite the warmth of the weather, wore a fur-lined overcoat, rushed impetuously into the room. "Sir Lionel," cried Smith eagerly, "I warned you, and see, you have had a very narrow escape." Sir Lionel Barton glanced at what lay upon the floor, then from Smith to myself, and from me to Inspector Weymouth. He dropped into one of the few chairs unstacked with books. "Mr. Smith," he said with emotion, "what does this mean? Tell me quickly." In brief terms, Smith detailed the happenings of the night, or so much as he knew of them. Sir Lionel Barton listened, sitting quite still the while, an unusual repose in a man of such evidently tremendous nervous activity. "He came for the jewels," he said slowly when Smith was finished, and his eyes turned to the body of the dead Italian. "I was wrong to submit him to the temptation. God knows what Qui was doing in hiding. Perhaps he had come to murder me, as you surmise, Mr. Smith, though I find it hard to believe. But I don't think this is the handiwork of your Chinese doctor." He fixed his gaze upon the sarcophagus. Smith stared at him in surprise. "What do you mean, Sir Lionel?" The famous traveller continued to look towards the sarcophagus with something in his blue eyes that might have been dread. "I received a wire from Professor Rembold tonight," he continued. "You were correct in supposing that no one but Strozza knew of my absence. I dressed hurriedly and met the professor at the Travellers. He knew that I was to read a paper next week upon. Again he looked toward the mummy case, the tomb of Makara, and he knew that the sarcophagus had been brought, untouched, to England. He begged me not to open it." Nayland Smith was studying the speaker's face. "What reason did he give for so extraordinary a request?" he asked. Sir Lionel Barton hesitated. "One," he replied at last, "which amused me at the time. I must inform you that Makara, whose tomb my agent had discovered during my absence in Tibet, and to enter which I broke my return journey to Alexandria, was a high priest and first prophet of Aman, under the pharaoh of the Exodus, in short, one of the magicians who contested in magic arts with Moses. I thought the discovery unique, until Professor Rembold furnished me with some curious particulars respecting the death of M. Page Leroy, the French Egyptologist, particulars new to me. We listened in growing surprise, scarcely knowing to what this tended. M. Leroy, continued Barton, discovered, but kept secret, the tomb of Amenti, another of this particular brotherhood. It appears that he opened the mummy case on the spot. These priests were of royal line, and are buried in the valley of Biban-le-Moloch. His fellah and Arab servants deserted him for some reason on seeing the mummy case, and he was found dead, apparently strangled, beside it. The matter was hushed up by the Egyptian government. Rembold could not explain why, but he begged of me not to open the sarcophagus of Makara. A silence fell. The strange facts regarding the sudden death of Page Leroy, which I now heard for the first time, had impressed me unpleasantly, coming from a man of Sir Lionel Barton's experience and reputation. "How long had it lain in the docks?" joked Smith. "For 2 days, I believe." "I am not a superstitious man, Mr. Smith, but neither is Professor Rembold, and now that I know the facts respecting Page Leroy, I can find it in my heart to thank God that I did not see whatever came out of that sarcophagus." Nayland Smith stared him hard in the face. "I am glad you did not, Sir Lionel," he said, "for whatever the priest Makara has to do with the matter, by means of his sarcophagus, Dr. Fu-Manchu has made his first attempt upon your life. He has failed, but I hope you will accompany me from here to a hotel. He will not fail twice." Chapter 12. It was the night following that of the double tragedy at Rowan House. Nayland Smith, with Inspector Weymouth, was engaged in some mysterious inquiry at the docks, and I had remained at home to resume my strange chronicle. And, why should I not confess it, my memories had frightened me. I was arranging my notes respecting the case of Sir Lionel Barton. They were hopelessly incomplete. For instance, I had jotted down the following queries. Did any true parallel exist between the death of M. Page Leroy and the death of Quay, the Chinaman, and of Strozza? What had become of the mummy of Macara? The 3. How had the murderer escaped from a locked room? 4. What was the purpose of the rubber stopper? 5. Why was Quay hiding in the conservatory? 5. Why was Quay hiding in the conservatory? 6. Was the green mist a mere subjective hallucination, a figment of Croxted's imagination, or had he actually seen it? Until these questions were satisfactorily answered, further progress was impossible. Nayland Smith frankly admitted that he was out of his depth. It looks, on the face of it, more like a case for the psychical research people than for a plain civil servant, lately of Mandalay, he had said only that morning. Sir Lionel Barton really believes that supernatural agencies were brought into operation by the opening of the High Priest's coffin. For my part, even if I believed the same, I should still maintain that Dr. Fu-Manchu controlled those manifestations. But reason it out for yourself and see if we arrive at any common centre. Don't work so much upon the datum of the green mist, but keep to the facts which are established. I commenced to knock out my pipe in the ashtray, then paused, pipe in hand. The house was quite still, for my landlady and all the small household were out. Above the noise of the passing tramcar, I thought I had heard the hall door open. In the ensuing silence, I sat and listened. Not a sound. Stay! I slipped my hand into the table drawer, took out my revolver, and stood up. There was a sound. Someone or something was creeping upstairs in the dark. Familiar with the ghastly media employed by the Chinaman, I was seized with an impulse to leap to the door, shut and lock it. But the rustling sound proceeded, now, from immediately outside my partially opened door. I had not the time to close it. Knowing somewhat of the horrors at the command of Fu-Manchu, I had not the courage to open it. My heart leaping wildly, and my eyes upon that bar of darkness with its gruesome potentialities, I waited for whatever was to come. Perhaps 12 seconds passed in silence. "Who's there?" I cried. "Answer, or I fire." "Ah, no," came a soft voice, thrillingly musical. "Put it down, that pistol. Quick, I must speak to you." The door was pushed open, and there entered a slim figure wrapped in a hooded cloak. My hand fell, and I stood, stricken to silence, looking into the beautiful dark eyes of Dr. Fu-Manchu's messenger, if her own statement could be credited. Slave. On 2 occasions this girl, whose association with the doctor was one of the most profound mysteries of the case, had risked, I cannot say what, unnameable punishment perhaps, to save me from death, in both cases from a terrible death. For what was she come now? Her lips slightly parted, she stood, holding her cloak about her, and watching me with great passionate eyes. "Here," I began, but she shook her head impatiently. "He has a duplicate key of the house door," was her amazing statement. "I have never betrayed a secret of my master before, but you must arrange to replace the lock." She came forward and rested her slim hands confidingly upon my shoulders. "I have come again to ask you to take me away from him," she said simply, and she lifted her face to me. Her words struck a chord in my heart, which sang with strange music, with music so barbaric that, frankly, I blushed to find it harmony. Have I said that she was beautiful? It can convey no faint conception of her. With her pure, fair skin, eyes like the velvet darkness of the East, and red lips so tremulously near to mine, she was the most seductively lovely creature I ever had looked upon. In that electric moment, my heart went out in sympathy to every man who had bartered honour, country, all for a woman's kiss. "I will see that you are placed under proper protection," I said firmly, but my voice was not quite my own. "It is quite absurd to talk of slavery here in England. You are a free agent, or you could not be here now. Dr. Fu-Manchu cannot control your actions." "Ah," she cried, casting back her head scornfully and releasing a cloud of hair, through whose softness gleamed a jewelled headdress. "No, he cannot? Do you know what it means to have been a slave? Here in your free England, do you know what it means? The razzia, the desert journey, the whips of the drivers, the house of the dealer, the shame. Bah, how beautiful she was in her indignation. Slavery is put down, you imagine, perhaps. You do not believe that today, 25 English sovereigns will buy a gala girl who is brown and, whisper, 250 a Circassian who is white. No, there is no slavery. So, then what am I? She threw open her cloak, and it is a literal fact that I rubbed my eyes, half believing that I dreamed. For beneath, she was arrayed in gossamer silk, which more than indicated the perfect lines of her slim shape, wore a jewelled girdle and barbaric ornaments, was a figure fit for the walled gardens of Stamboul, a figure amazing, incomprehensible, in the prosaic setting of my rooms. Tonight I had no time to make myself an English miss, she said, wrapping her cloak quickly about her. You see me as I am. Her garments exhaled a faint perfume, and it reminded me of another meeting I had had with her. I looked into the challenging eyes. Your request is but a pretense, I said. Why do you keep the secrets of that man when they mean death to so many? Death! I have seen my own sister die of fever in the desert, seen her thrown like carrion into a hole in the sand. I have seen men flogged until they prayed for death as a boon. I have known the lash myself. Death! What does it matter? She shocked me inexpressibly. Enveloped in her cloak again, and with only her slight accent to betray her, it was dreadful to hear such words from a girl who, save for her singular type of beauty, might have been a cultured European. Prove, then, that you really wish to leave this man's service. Tell me what killed Strozza and the Chinaman, I said. She shrugged her shoulders. I do not know that. But if you will carry me off... She clutched me nervously, so that I am helpless, lock me up so that I cannot escape, beat me if you like, I will tell you all I do know. While he is my master, I will never betray him. Tear me from him by force, do you understand? by force, and my lips will be sealed no longer. Ah, but you do not understand, with your proper authorities, your police. Police. Ah, I have said enough. A clock across the common began to strike. The girl started and laid her hands upon my shoulders again. There were tears glittering among the curved black lashes. You do not understand, she whispered. Oh, will you never understand and release me from him? I must go. Already I have remained too long. Listen, go out without delay. Remain out at a hotel where you will, but do not stay here. And Nayland Smith, what is he to me, this Nayland Smith? Ah, why will you not unseal my lips? You are in danger, you hear me, in danger. Go away from here tonight. She dropped her hands and ran from the room. In the open doorway she turned, stamping her foot passionately. You have hands and arms, she cried, and yet you let me go. Be warned, then. Fly from here. She broke off with something that sounded like a sob. I made no move to stay her, this beautiful accomplice of the arch-murderer Fu-Manchu. I heard her light footsteps pattering down the stairs. I heard her open and close the door of which Dr. Fu-Manchu held the key. Still, I stood where she had parted from me, and was so standing when a key grated in the lock, and Nayland Smith came running up. Did you see her? I began. But his face showed that he had not done so, and rapidly I told him of my strange visitor, of her words, of her warning. How can she have passed through London in that costume? I cried in bewilderment. Where can she have come from? Smith shrugged his shoulders and began to stuff broad-cut mixture into the familiar cracked briar. She might have travelled in a car or in a cab, he said, and undoubtedly she came direct from the house of Dr. Fu-Manchu. You should have detained her, Petrie. It is the third time we have had that woman in our power, the third time we have let her go free. Smith, I replied, I couldn't. She came of her own free will to give me a warning. She disarms me. Because you can see she is in love with you, he suggested, and burst into one of his rare laughs when the angry flush rose to my cheek. She is, Petrie. Why pretend to be blind to it? You don't know the Oriental mind as I do, but I quite understand the girl's position. She fears the English authorities, but would submit to capture by you. If you would only seize her by the hair, drag her to some cellar, hurl her down and stand over her with a whip, she would tell you everything she knows and salve her strange Eastern conscience with the reflection that speech was forced from her. I'm not joking, it is so, I assure you. And she would adore you for your savagery, deeming you forceful and strong. Smith, I said, be serious. You know what her warning meant before. I can guess what it means now, he rapped. Hello! Someone was furiously ringing the bell. No one at home, said my friend. I will go. I think I know what it is. A few minutes later he returned, carrying a large square package. From Weymouth, he explained, by district messenger. I left him behind at the docks, and he arranged to forward any evidence which subsequently he found. This will be fragments of the mummy. What, you think the mummy was abstracted? Yes, at the docks. I am sure of it, and somebody else was in the sarcophagus when it reached Rowan House. A sarcophagus, I find, is practically airtight, so that the use of the rubber stopper becomes evident ventilation. How this person killed Strozza I have yet to learn. Also, how he escaped from a locked room. And what about the green mist? Nayland Smith spread his hands in a characteristic gesture. The green mist, Petrie, can be explained in several ways. Remember, we have only one man's word that it existed. It is at best a confusing datum to which we must not attach a factitious importance. He threw the wrappings on the floor and tugged at a twine loop in the lid of the square box, which now stood upon the table. Suddenly, the lid came away, bringing with it a lead lining, such as is usual in tea chests. This lining was partially attached to one side of the box, so that the action of removing the lid at once raised and tilted it. Then happened a singular thing. Out over the table billowed a sort of yellowish-green cloud, an oily vapour and an inspiration, it was nothing less, born of a memory and of some words of my beautiful visitor came to me. R-U-N. Ah, Smitch, I screamed. The door for your life. Fu-Manchu sent that box. I threw my arms round him. As he bent forward, the moving vapour rose almost to his nostrils. I dragged him back and all but pitched him out onto the landing. We entered my bedroom, and there, as I turned on the light, I saw that Smith's tanned face was unusually drawn and touched with pallor. It is a poisonous gas, I said hoarsely, in many respects identical with chlorine, but having unique properties which prove it to be something else. God and Fu-Manchu alone know what. It is the fumes of chlorine that kill the men in the bleaching powder works. We have been blind, I particularly. Don't you see? There was no one in the sarcophagus, Smith, but there was enough of that fearful stuff to have suffocated a regiment. Smith clenched his fists convulsively. My God, he said, how can I hope to deal with the author of such a scheme? I see the whole plan. He did not reckon on the mummy case being overturned, and Quee's part was to remove the plug with the aid of the string, after Sir Lionel had been suffocated. The gas, I take it, is heavier than air. Chlorine gas has a specific gravity of 2.470, I said, 2.5 times heavier than air. You can pour it from jar to jar like a liquid if you are wearing a chemist's mask. In these respects, this stuff appears to be similar. The points of difference would not interest you. The sarcophagus would have emptied through the vent, and the gas have dispersed, with no clue remaining, except the smell. I did smell it, Petrie, on the stopper, but, of course, was unfamiliar with it. You may remember that you were prevented from doing so by the arrival of Sir Lionel. The scent of those infernal flowers must partially have drowned it too. Poor misguided Strozza inhaled the stuff, capsized the case in his fall, and all the gas. Went pouring under the conservatory door and down the steps where Quee was crouching. Croxted's breaking the window created sufficient draught to disperse what little remained. It will have settled on the floor now. I will go and open both windows. Nayland raised his haggard face. He evidently made more than was necessary to dispatch Sir Lionel Barton, he said, and contemptuously. You note the attitude, Petrie, contemptuously devoted the surplus to me. His contempt is justified. I am a child striving to cope with a mental giant. It is by no wit of mine that Dr. Fu-Manchu scores a double failure.